Go ahead.
Here.
Jody, Tim, Len,
Len,
Brian. Here. We're all here. Let's see, approval of minutes from November 17th, 2023. You guys have a chance to take a look at the meeting? The minutes, I mean?
Motion to approve the minutes?
All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Okay. Ninigret Park, master plan update, Chairman comments. I just had a couple things I just wanted to say before we got rolling here. Good evening. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank the members of the Ninigret Park Master Plan Committee that's with me, been helping out during all these meetings. I'd like to thank Vicky and the Park and Recs Department and the gentleman from VHB for participating in this. This is the last meeting of the Ninigret Park Master Plan Committee. After this meeting, VHB will be sending the final plan to Vicky, and then she'll be forwarding it to the town council. As chairman, I just wanted to see if we could, I just wanted to briefly say, as chairman, when we started this process, I pretty much approached the council on it. I just simply wanted to see if we could move the two existing events that happen in the park, Rhythm and Roots and the Seafood Festival, for a different location in the park, so the public could enjoy the park at all times of the year when the events are going on. That's what my initial thing was going forward with this. And I didn't like the fact that a lot of other people had approached me that, especially Rhythm and Roots, nobody ever wanted to see Rhythm and Roots go anywhere, but nobody wanted to see the main part of the park, the playgrounds and the pond and the place being taken away from the families on Labor Day weekend. So that was it. There was never an intent. I never had an intent, or anybody else having an intent, to build an event center or have a big concert or anything else that they've been hearing. This was just, that was the intent going into this, and this is how it sort of got the ball rolling. We never thought or even mentioned increasing the size of the events or adding an event. And to my knowledge, nobody has come forward with another event at this point in time. My idea was just that the park should be open to everybody all the time of the year, all the residents, the children, and the families throughout the summer, and one event should not take away from allowing the public to go to it. That's just my thoughts. Please hold all comments to the end after VHB gets done with theirs for comments and questions. They're going to be coming up now and giving a presentation on this final draft. Go ahead, gentlemen. Yes. Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all for attention. Thank you for
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for being here. We know this is a very important initiative for the community. It's important for us as planners and designers as well to make sure that we help to guide you as the community to develop this master plan update. A few things we're going to talk about today, just the agenda. Just I want to really highlight just a little bit more about what a master plan is. And that'll help kind of initiate some of the conversation and what this really means to you as we hand this over to the community in the town to be able to have this vision for the community and for the park. We'll talk about a few other things. Josh is going to go into a little bit more detail about how we understand the park and what we've learned from you, which is most important. And we'll highlight the 2014 master plan as well, just briefly. Obviously, the more important part about this is the 2023 master plan update. We'll go into a few other slides as well, and then we'll be able to reference the 2023 draft master plan update when we get further into the presentation. So, master plan, what is it? One thing I want to make sure everybody's very clear: this is not a design. We're trying to formulate a place. And so it's a master plan is a holistic conceptual long-term strategy or a blueprint to help outline how things can be done in the park in the future. And so it helps to create a vision. It's not, again, a design. It's not something that's going to be immediately constructed, permitted, and so forth. It has to go through a very extensive process beyond this. But it's this vision that we've all created together as you, the community, and as us as the designers. And it's a culmination of all these alternatives, which is the three alternatives, which is the 2008 master plan that was approved, which we did, and then also the 2014 master plan, which was not approved officially. And then, of course, the 2023 is a culmination, again, of those two plans, and then all the information that you've been able to provide us over the past several months. And one of the things that's really important about a master plan in a design process working with communities about placemaking. And this is a term you can go on a website. There's a placemaking website, goes into all what that's about. And it's very important because it's a public process on how to come to consensus on a design for a place. And it's most important to get that community feedback to be able to get steered in the right direction. And one of the first, there's 11 principles to placemaking. And the first one is that the community are the experts. You're the experts on the design of this place. You know it the best. The committee knows it the best. You as residents know it the best. And so that's where we start. And so it's obviously important for us to listen to you as we have done over the last several months. And we've also looked at all the different emails that have been sent. I think it's probably creeping up on around 60 or so emails that we've read. And so we really appreciate that feedback. We take it very, very seriously. But all these different things culminate in developing a place, whether you're thinking about ecology, whether you think about just creating a memorable, safe, enjoyable environment. Of course, as I mentioned, the stakeholders' input is most important. And of course, ecology here is extremely important. The environment, nature, what's happening within the park to really enhance what's happening here from an environmental standpoint. And then also, it's very interesting that this was an air base, but it is kind of this transition of going into more of a park setting rather than an air base setting. And so all of these, again, things that we've talked about start to help us develop that vision to get towards this more park setting. And so I'm going to pass it on over to Josh. He's going to go through several slides, and these slides are really important to let you understand what we've taken in for information and then how we're eventually applying it to this master plan update. So I'm going to let Josh really kind of scan through these slides. We're going to try and go as quickly as possible because we have 30 minutes to really kind of get through this, but then we would love to get your input and any questions at the end.
So when the town received Ninigret Park, it was given to them through the Federal Lands to Parks program from the U.S. General Services. And the use of the Ninigret Park has to be consistent with the decision that the adjacent property is to be used as a wildlife preserve. This is the decision that Paul Goulding made back in 1980, and this is the main decision that dictates the uses of the park now. 172 acres of the park are to be used as a buffer for the wildlife preserve, and currently there are uses within that park that are kind of contradictory to this, such as the events that were mentioned earlier, and identifying where we can still facilitate those events, but in a more efficient and natural way is the goal of this update. There's also a stewardship report every 5 years now to confirm the park's alignment with the original FLP program of utilization. So you can be sure that any changes within the park will be supervised and approved by the government. And then there's 55 acres of municipal land, aside from the 172, that will function as a better space for the events. So looking at the original approved program of utilization from the application that the town provided in 1980, we have revegetation, removal of pavement, demoing of the existing military buildings, implementation of an information center, visitor center, security center, interpretive center, an observation deck and pond walk at Ninigret Pond, some environmental education exhibits and opportunities throughout the park, seating and lighting to be provided in this area, although we have not proposed any within our design. Interpretive stations and shelters throughout the wooded areas, bandstand common areas, which was originally identified to be in the open space near Frosty Drew, but we have identified a better area for this. Hiking and bicycle trails, athletic fields to include football, soccer, and baseball, the parking area, and then, as I said, demo of the buildings. So looking at the site context, you have residences to the north, you have the wildlife reserve to the south, as well as some critical resource areas in the salt ponds of Ninigret Pond. And then you have town services up to the north here, as well as some local businesses here. So current uses of the project areas, we have athletics, we have open space, the bike course, some fitness opportunities, parking area, which is that massive sea of parking, kind of an eyesore to the site that is left over from the air-based use. The Little Ninny Pond area, disc golf, the senior center, the dog park, and then fish and wildlife, which needs to use the park as an access. Looking at the environmental condition, there's multiple wells on site that are supervised by the Army Corps of Engineers. This black outline here is the 55 municipal acreage, and then you have multiple Army Corps of Engineer locations in the orange here that if development is to be done here, they'll have to wait until the Army Corps is out of these areas and it has approved them for use. There's also an existing land use restriction, which we've identified in yellow here. So summarizing the feedback we've received from your emails and the conversations we've been having throughout the meeting, this is just a brief summary. There's been a lot of topics, but the main ones, we want to improve the safety, the circulation, the wayfinding, the opportunities for recreation and athletics. Indoor recreation was identified on the 2021 town survey as lacking throughout the town. We want to implement hiking throughout the park and improve the sustainability. And then there's majority opposition to lighting, a large concert area, permanent structures, and a band show. So our priorities, after reviewing all of this data, we've come up with creating an environmentally sound park. That's going to be first and foremost. We want to create a space that functions for fish and wildlife, as well as any wildlife that's within the park and the natural spaces. We want to create safe pedestrian access throughout the park. We want to declutter vehicular circulation, reduce the impact of the events on fish and wildlife, but there's a lot of trash and other edits that end up flowing over the barrier there. Create an appropriate relationship between the uses so that there's, you know, the edge conditions of each use make sense. Expand the programming so that there's more to do within the park. Establish a coherent and fitting aesthetic that fits within the town of Charlestown as a whole, not just Ninigret Park. And then utilize as much existing infrastructure. We already have plenty of paved areas. We don't need to create more parking in natural spaces. But we also want to reduce the paved areas and then formalize those parking areas with stormwater as well as pedestrian access. So looking at the 2014 master plan, this is the guiding document that we had to work off of that was never approved. As you can see, this performance area is up here in the 55-acre municipal parcel, but it is really just a large open space. And I think that's why it doesn't quite function right. It doesn't provide anything else but lawn and really only facilitates events. We also have recycled parking in the middle, which is a tenant that we will be carrying into ours. Preservation of open space, the athletics fields, a community center, and maintaining this whole eastern portion of the site and disc golf, Frosty Drew, the dog park, as well as the senior center. So moving on to our plan, we have, as you come into the site, you have an improved entry with two single lane egress and entry, improved signage as well, carrying on those rock walls that make the park look so nice. We have the implementation of community center with a new parking lot that'll have drop off for easy access, a recreation center as well for indoor events, such as basketball or any other indoor events that could be performed there. Athletics fields with the addition of lacrosse and football. These are not permanent fields. This is just how the space is used now. You know, you can move the fields around. You have movable infrastructure such as bleachers and painted lines and such. New playgrounds throughout the park at the community center here, and as well as centralized at the athletic fields. A rearrangement of the Criterion bike course to allow us to give back this buffer here to Fish and Wildlife that was originally given to implement the bike course. And then pretty much preserving the eastern portion of the site as it stands. It's a good buffer for Fish and Wildlife. There's a lot of good wooded areas. So we want to implement a hiking loop that goes through the entire site. We'll take a better look at that. We want to move the senior center up to the community center so that it's easily accessible, and then preserve that building and area for the gardens and make it more of an educational nature center.
And just quickly on the playgrounds, we show playgrounds, multiple playgrounds up towards the athletic fields and the community center is just options. We're not proposing 3 additional playgrounds. It's just I wanted to identify. We did hear that bringing another playground into the park, especially during any of the concerts and so forth, would be important to be able to have access to another playground rather than down near Little Mini Pond.
So you can kind of see here how the edges of each use abut each other. You have most of the active recreation going on in the western portion of the site, away from Fish and Game, which is down here. The bike course will be limited to just its track and will be reforested around it. As I said, mentioning giving back this buffer area to Fish and Wildlife. Little Mini Pond will also have revegetation efforts along with the open space venue, the nature center, and then of course disc golf.
One of the important things to recognize here is the Criterion bike path. I know it can stay, but it does sever the different uses between all the athletic field areas and then the circulation through the rest of the park. The other thing too is, keep in mind, all of the current event parking happens down in that area where the current, this proposed area is in the open lawn. That's bringing all these different vehicles with oil, gas, whatever it might be, that's closer to the Fish and Wildlife area. And so to be able to pull that stuff out of there and keep it where the open space venue area is, that just helps more from an environmental standpoint.
So looking at the existing circulation analysis, there's not a lot of options for in and out. You have the loop, two-way loop that goes up here and out, and that creates some conflicts with the multi-use path, as well as for Fish and Wildlife during events. It's tough to access when these loops are being taken up with, thousands of or hundreds of cars. It can be difficult to get down here, and they need to be able to access through the park, as well as the senior center, and pretty much all of the other desirable portions of the site. As you can see here, the red denotes the impact of rhythm and roots. You can see how far that goes down into the buffer zone. This is used for RV parking. This is used for camping here. That generates a lot of oil runoff and waste that I'm sure as much as you can clean up, there probably is some left over. The purple is the impact of the seafood festival. And so it really does take up a large portion of the site. It's tough to access the field. All of this parking is taking up during this time, and it's hard to access the other amenities. Looking at the proposed circulation, you'll have a new entrance here to come in and access the entire park and parking areas. So if there's an athletics game going on, you can come in, park here, even if there's an event going on, which will take up this area here. You can come in, go all the way down to Fish and Game, access the nature center, all without being impacted by an event. You have a improved entry sequence, which will have more tree coverage and better vegetation. We have preserved the memorial space here because that is identified as a significant area for the fighters that have died on the site. And then also at the community center, we had an option to propose it on the 55-acre municipal side, but it works better on this side because as you come into the park, you're going to be on the right side drive. If you want to access the community center, you're going to just take a right here, come in, and then you'll be in this parking area. There's multiple drop-off areas here for athletics at the community center as well. So it's easy access. You can be in and out without impacting the rest of the site.
And anything to mention with the upper circulation of the road coming in? Yeah, okay.
So we're looking at the events analysis. All of the red is going to be your daily use circulation. You can access all of the daily uses without being impacted by the events. The events, you'll have a two-way that splits into a one-way loop to keep all of the traffic moving when they're coming in and out. Now, the way the events are used, there's a lot of camping for rhythm and roots. So we established this grove area that's structured much like an orchard. You could do linear plantings and trying to create these individual camping areas. That is how they kind of use this space down here. I don't know if, I'm sure many of you have been there during rhythm and roots. They have these lateral lines that cut across the open space down here by the criterium, and they camp within these spaces. So you can create a vegetated space that functions in a very similar way. If you were to park and come in for an event, you would come in and go around this circuit loop, and this is going to keep everybody moving through as they're leaving or entering the site. There's also access points for event staff here and here so that they can bring in infrastructure, the temporary infrastructure. There's no permanent infrastructure proposed here other than an EMS and security station for the town services so that they can have closer supervision of the events, as well as some support or storage buildings down to the south here, which really aren't necessary, but could benefit. And looking at the pedestrian and bike circulation, we've maintained the multi-use path that is existing, as well as implementing a new connection right here, which utilizes an existing pathway. What this will do is give you an internal loop so that if there is a lot of cars driving around, you can stay within an internal loop and not have to cross over any roads except for right here. But the little mini area doesn't handle too much traffic and it won't be too big of an issue. We carried the 2014 design of having cut throughs for the pedestrian access through the parking areas. This will improve pedestrian permeability from the entire site. You could park over here and pretty much reach any part of the site you want safely without having to cross over any unstructured pathway. We also have the implementation of a circuit hiking loop and a circuit loop around the athletics field. So looking at the entry sequence, as I mentioned, you would come in, you have drop-offs at the community center, and the recreation center, which is going to be a major destination point. And then you have separation of pickleball courts, a reestablishment of tennis here. We've heard that pickleball is a little bit loud and pretty busy, and so we wanted to separate those uses there. You have pedestrian access around this entire site. You have the restrooms and storage down here in case you're playing here. Here, you could add existing pavilion. We've done a project where we have skate paths, and that's a consideration here. You could also just implement a commercial skating rink. And then you have a loop that goes around, so you could have a walking or jogging loop that goes around this entire area. And that's why it's geared towards fitness. You have an additional parking lot that actually uses the existing pavement from the Criterion bike course. So it's really not removing any green space from this area to provide additional parking when you're having athletics games. You also have the implementation of stormwater controls. This is really important for the site. There's a lot of flat areas and a lot of water runoff that's going to collect, oil deposits from cars and such. And so what we want to do is capture that as best we can. We've identified a few areas throughout the site that are good for that. So looking at the open space venue, as I mentioned, first thing you're going to see when you come in is the EMS security building, so you know exactly where to go if you have an issue. And then you can come in down here, and as they use the space here in the existing space, they really just circuit the cars around and then park them into the lanes that they have set up. So that structure, it's a very similar use to how they use it now. You have pedestrian access on the outside so that there's no conflicts there. People can park, walk down to the access, and then enter into the event space safely. This is where we intend to have all of the camping and RV spaces. We've sized these appropriately. The existing space is about 8 acres for the performance venue. We've provided about 8 acres for the performances here, separated by earth berms for sound attenuation for the residents on the other side. But these earth berms are going to be your best bet for silencing the sound coming from the music venue. You can use vegetation, but sound does permeate through vegetation. Earth will absorb the sound and it won't bounce it back. So that's also good for the wildlife on site. Down here, you have emergency egress as well. If there was an issue within the event center and while everybody was leaving or coming in, EMS could exit through the bottom of the site. This is not intended to be a main access road for event users. Looking at the athletics fields, we maintain a very, very similar structure to how it is now and how it shows up on the 2014 with the implementation of a football and lacrosse separated from the existing soccer fields. They maintain their own fields, so football and lacrosse should probably maintain their own field. Walking loop, as I said, for any parents that want to be active while their children are playing sports, as well as a loop around the new playground, which has been centralized near a concessions area, and another stormwater capture. And then these rectangles along each field here are actually movable bleachers, but they're not permanent infrastructure. And there's not going to be that many. That's just showing you that you do have space to put seating if you were to implement it. And then looking at the criterion, this is another big move. Why do we want to move it? Well, as I mentioned before, we want to give this back to Fish and Wildlife to increase their buffering as this space is intended to be used. But we do like the criterion bike course. It is well liked and it's well used. And it can be phased out. This doesn't have to happen first. This can happen over time when the criterion needs to be repaved or resurfaced. That would be a good opportunity to implement this. An option to implement this as you go is to put the football field along the existing criterion course before it gets removed, and then implement this order afterward. We created a 1 mile even loop, different from the 0.9 mile that it is now, and added a half-mile course right here so that you can have different sized events. We've also generally reforested the area and utilized the existing parking areas as best we can to provide ample parking for multiple events. If you're going to have an event up here at the athletics, down at the crypt, and you want to use the fitness area, there should be ample parking for all of this. There's also a viewing area along here, and we're preserving the historic watchtower from the airbase. And then looking at this entire eastern portion of the site, we're keeping the basketball courts and as well as the amenities, adding restrooms. This is going to be an additional parking area separated from the events parking, which is primarily going to take up the central area. This will provide access to this space here. And then we want to create a formal connection to Frosty Drew. They have a fairly small parking lot, and rather than expanding, we could utilize this existing parking lot so that pedestrians could come down, as well as this parking lot over here, so that they can have more visitors come to their space. We've also identified a space for utilities and the DPW to use. The troll,
Oh, sorry about that one. Yeah, go ahead.
the troll installations too, these are coming to Ninigret Park and we've identified areas that would be good. You want to implement them into the hiking area and maybe utilize some of the existing boulders that are on site to create maybe a rock garden or some sort of adventure garden out there. Another one's going to be here across from the so that you can see it when you're driving by or playing disc golf. So looking at the environmental aspects of the site, this is the existing pavement and vegetation layout. You can see there's a lot of pavement on the site and there's quite a few gaps in the vegetation as well. This is what we're proposing to remove. We're really trying to minimize the removal of vegetation. All the other white spaces are open green space, mostly grass, which does reduce heat, but it doesn't provide anything other than open space and it doesn't have shade. But what we wanted to do on this is really just reduce the impact. This looks like a big blob, but we're going to give back a lot more. And you can see here, the light yellow is open space. The bright green is going to be the additional vegetation that comes onto the site. So we're really increasing the buffer here. We're taking up a little bit of the open space here, which I know is well liked. And the reason why is because we're providing additional open space at the event center. When there's not an event going on, you can use this space. It's going to be a nice place for a picnic. It's going to be a nice shady area. And you could go on, climb these berms, interact with them, maybe use them for sledding during winter. So then pedestrian scale improvements, some things that you don't really see at that 150-foot scale. Wayfinding, we're going to have improved signage. We're going to identify areas of improved signage. You're going to have shrub plantings across the site, improved crossings so that pedestrians feel safe when they're going across. Reflectors along the roads, rather than implementing lighting, you could have reflectors along the road so that at night you can use the headlights and that's going to guide your pathway along. Adventure gardens and rock gardens to complement the troll sculptures, the trail system, restrooms, additional fencing between any areas that we identify as conflicting uses for permeability purposes, rock walls to carry on the aesthetic of Ninigret, headlight control with the berming of these of the central drive. What this is going to do is provide more soil for the trees to grow in. As you see now, the trees struggle with the pavement that they're in, and they're going to they're really not surviving right now. So they need more room to grow, and that's what that's going to do. It's also going to lift them out of the pavement when the pavement gets really hot, and that's why the roots are struggling to grow. What this will do for lighting is, as you're coming in, it's gonna keep the vegetation thick, and it's gonna block all the lighting. So if you go down here at night, as it currently stands, your headlights just shoot across all the way to Frosty Drew. If you go in through here, your headlights are going to be very, very well blocked all the way down until you get right up to Frosty Drew. So you're going to have a lot less light bleed throughout the park.
It also softens the view of those parking lots beyond as well. You see, they sketched over this picture, all the parking lots are on each side here. So when you come in, you see more green rather than just parking lot as it currently stands.
And this is a good precedent of what the entry could look like. We have a very similar central drive, and this is a great usage of berming, as you see it here. It blocks any unnecessary views. It also creates a unique experience as you're driving past it. It kind of gives some elevation to a very flat site. And I think that's something interesting that could be an asset for Ninigret Park.
What's interesting, I think, about this, you might be familiar with the old Weymouth Air Base. This is very similar to Ninigret as well, an old air base that turned more into like a residential community with open spaces. But you could just see how they really treated the front entrance. It's not a super grand entrance, but it's a little bit more subdued, has more vegetation to it, but it's very welcoming.
So some alternatives we've considered, as I mentioned, the community center and rec center on the 55 acre. Why do we not want to do that? Well, we have pavement directly on the other side that we can use for parking areas for the community center. It also conflicts with events. If we want to keep that event space as far away from fish and wildlife as possible, then putting the community center over there is going to create a conflict with that. It's also difficult for circulation with the events, as well as if you came in on the park on a two one-way lane road, you have to cut across the left side to get onto the north side. And then it's going to also be more tree removal because that is a well-vegetated area that we wanted to preserve for hiking. Another option, keep the criterion where it is. As we mentioned, it severs the parking, creates pedestrian conflicts, permeability conflicts from if you wanted to park on near the athletic field and move over to the little mini pond area, it would be much easier with the reorganization that we have. Also, the pavement is not going to last forever, and so at some point it is going to have to be replaced. And then you won't have a loop trail without moving the creek. That buffer area that I keep talking about, giving it back to fish and wildlife, that area is going to be critical for implementing the hiking loop trail to create a circle loop around the entire park because it cuts all the way down into Fish and Game, and Fish and Game has their own hiking path that we don't want to conflict with because they don't want to have dogs in their area.
Yeah, just, we talk about phasing. It's like, how does this all come together over a period of time? This is kind of a slide where we're trying to help us identify like how can things be organized in the short term, long term, and how can you approach to doing these improvements? So in the light green, you can see the different areas, removal of pavement, like starting off with more of an ecological approach, getting rid of the pavement that's required from the wildlife down at the southern portion of the site around the crit, and revegetating that to, determining whether the football field is necessary. That can happen actually in different phases. That could happen in this phase. It could also happen long term. And again, this is where this phasing approach, whether you decide to keep the crit in the same location, whether the football field gets installed later on, or you shift it down to this location here, it's still maintain the crit. So we're not saying it's absolutely critical to get rid of or shift the crit. It just helps a lot, quite a bit in the sense of circulation, environmental aspects as well. And then of course, looking at if we did revegetate and get rid of the pavement down near the crit, we look at, okay, what do we do with that material in the short term? How do we get rid of it? It's going to cost a lot of money to take that pavement off site. We can stockpile the pavement up at the top in the open space, reuse that with all the berming that we're proposing. And that's one of the critical things that where berming came into play, not only for noise attenuation, but also to be able to reuse some of this material on site that needs to get removed or shifted around. And then different improvements around little mini ponds, the pickleball courts, and potentially a playground up near the athletic fields could be more of a short-term approach. Phase 2 could be more focused on the improvements to the public venue space, as Josh had highlighted, along with the parking. And so again, the parking, improving the pavement, improving pedestrian circulation through the parking, the potential berming along the main access road could really be important. But basically, you're trying to encompass all that circulation that is associated with the public venue open area and being able to shift all that circulation to one portion of the site. So that's kind of what phase 2 really focuses on. Then phase 3 is the community, the rec, Parks and Rec Community Center, of course, with the parking lot in the basketball courts. And then this is where it would make sense also if you wanted to focus here to do the football field, if that was the desire to go ahead and add that into the overall park. Because then all the different pavement, we could take capitalize again and judgment the pavement here, and if it's a later phase, this is where you can shift the crit. And then the circulation starts to come together in that particular portion of the site. And again, phase 4 is where technically the focus of the crit would be relocated, and that's where also the skate park that Josh mentioned, also the splash pad and potential ice park. Yeah, and again, just some different strategies we've talked about, from bioinfiltration on how to treat water on site with all these parking lots to be able to filter the water, different applications to really think about I know the lighting is really sensitive here, so we want to be sensitive about it too. So there are multiple different strategies with the lighting. And as you start to focus on different things throughout the park, obviously lighting always needs to be questioned. How, if anything happens in this park, and I know it's something that we don't want in the park, but if we want to make a safe environment, what are the most specialized treatments that we can do or subdued, whether it is the reflectors or up at the community center, if there's lighting to be able to provide a safe environment? Is there a way to actually provide a safe environment? If elderly people are utilizing community center a little bit later, during dusk, we want to make sure there's a safe environment. There is very specific ways to treat lighting if that was to be the only location within the park up near the community center. In different ways, if we were to control, if the crit were to stay in the same location, how can we control so that kids aren't crisscrossing or there isn't any circulation? Simple treatment like just a fence that would fit in the character of the park. And would actually really look nice while it's being very functional. And of course, the skate park, this is a skate park that we did over in Holyoke, which is actually this path that circles around. You can actually fill with water and the kids can skate around the path within the park. It's actually, it's really neat. I think that concludes our presentation. Anything else on your interest? But again, a little over time there, but we'll open it up.
Very good, thank you. Okay, move on to public comments. You guys want to, if anybody has a public comment, the best way to do it, I guess, is line up at the podium. And we'll go from there. Anybody got any questions for this gentleman? And just state your name, please, for the record. Is that on? You gotta press the button.
Okay. I'm Susan Mitchell. I live in Charlestown. Hi, I'm Susan Mitchell. I live in Charlestown. Did you just ask my name? So my question is, I keep hearing rhythm and roots repeated over and over again, and that seems to be rhythm and roots seems to be the main focus of everything we're talking about and shifting use of the park. I am all for athletic fields. I'm all for a community center. I think the criterion is fine, but I don't understand why a 7-day event is going to cause so much change in the park. How do we know they're going to stick around? How much revenue do they generate for the town?
That's the thing, if Roots does another 2 years and they decide for whatever reason to end it and nothing takes its place, we just have open fields and we'll have the seafood festival there.
I thought the seafood festival, I was told by someone in the town that the seafood festival preferred where they were because there was pavement there.
I mean, we don't know well, if it's feasible yet, but right with the Roots, I mean, we don't know how the longevity of it. I mean, we've been blessed where it's going, and the majority of people seem to like it. And like I said, I was just trying to get a fix.
And I understand that.
The town while that was going on.
So I guess to me, the cost benefit analysis doesn't make sense because of a 7-day use where we're not necessarily generating a ton of revenue for the town. We're also providing camping for people, which is not supporting local businesses. We live next door to it. We can hear them, out there cooking out and stuff like that. And that's fine. We bought our house knowing full well that Rhythm and Roots was happening and that the seafood festival was happening. But the camping to me seems kind of to go at odds with the idea of rejuvenating the town and some of the Route 1 corridor where we have hotels that have been vacant and abandoned for years, but we're going to provide camping during these events, which is not going to, inspire more development for the economic benefit of the town.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next.
Hello, my name is Carrie Schwab, and I am the project leader at the Rhode Island National Wildlife Refuge Complex, and Ninigret National Wildlife Refuge is on the border of the park. I have to just correct VHB a little bit. We like to be referred to as a refuge and not a preserve. It's just one of my little things, sorry. I've been asked tonight to read a letter from the National Park Service, Diane Keith. She has submitted a letter to the town council and also to Vicki, but I have been asked to read it tonight. So it was submitted on November 28th. And so dear Ms. Carney, I would like to refer to you to a letter dated from the National Park Service back in 2012 about the development of the of the Ninigret Park in Charlestown, Rhode Island. As you know, the National Park Service oversees the management of the Federal Lands to Parks program, and we are responsible for managing program's compliance at properties throughout the Northeast. Ninigret Park was deeded to the town in 1981 by the U.S. Department of Interior, acting through the Heritage Conservation and Recreation Service, the predecessor of the National Park Service's Federal Lands to Parks program. National Park Service appreciates that Charlestown has contracted with VHB to develop the new master plan for the park, and I've watched the previous town meetings via WebEx and found that VHB's presentations and the public comments very informative. I've also spoken directly with Josh, the landscape designer at VHB, who is working on the new master plan. As always, I appreciate how the town of Charlestown has provided the National Park Service with information on changes to the program of utilization and the progress of the master plan. I'm once again attaching the letter from my predecessor, Elise Fuller-Forrest, and I know it is on the website of the town, that explains past concerns with the development of any lighting of the athletic fields. I would like to emphasize the concerns Ms. LaForest stated in that letter and add that the National Park Service still has the same concerns with future development. NPS is fully aware that the 55-acre parcel is owned and managed directly by the town of Charlestown, while the remaining 172-acre parcel is in the FLP program. The potential impact of this lighting has been considered before by both the Fish and Wildlife Service and Park Service have concerns about the impacts that lighting could have on the wildlife. Without understanding where this lighting might be developed and the need for the lighting, Park Service is asking the town council to consider any changes in the park very carefully. Changes to the current program of utilization would need to be submitted to the National Park Service for review and approval. These changes are also subject to the National Environmental Policy Act due to the federal nexus of the property. The environmental screening form would need to be completed to determine the level of compliance needed for any changes on the 172-acre parcel in the FLP program. The environmental screening form will need to be completed for the master plan once it is finalized, to determine if there are any substantial changes being proposed for development and the use of Ninigret Park in the future. The ESF will help us determine how to fulfill NEPA requirements for the proposed changes to the park. This would include a complete environmental assessment process that will require review and approval. Require approval by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the State Historic Preservation Office, Native Tribal Consultation, Water Resources Review, and other federal agency review and approval as needed. The process will also include the public comment period through the National Park Service's Planning, Environment, and Public Comment website, PEPC. Once the master plan is completed and approved by the town of Charlestown, we have received the town's amendment to the program of utilization and the completed environmental screening form. National Park Service can then start the environmental compliance process. I am happy to assist the town with the environmental compliance, but the completing of the ESF and any NEPA compliance would be the responsibility of the town as the recipient of the property. Please also keep in mind that any revenue-generating activity in the FLP portion of Ninigret Park will have to have a concession agreement that is reviewed and approved by the National Park Service, and that money collected will need to go directly back to the park. We would highly recommend that you continue to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to mitigate effects on wildlife and wildlife habitat. It is National Park Service's understanding that the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the town and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was renewed in January 22 Charlestown Town Council meeting, and the spirit is in working cooperation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is ongoing. If you have any questions, and her contact information, she would happily attend any additional meetings in the future. She just needs advance notice because she is up in Boston. And thank you for the ongoing protection of this property for public recreation. We look forward to working with you in the town of Charlestown. Sincerely, Diane Keith. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciate the presentation tonight from all of you. You've put in a lot of hard work, and it was nice to see some of the comments that people have been giving you incorporated. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fletcher. I live over on Hunters Harbor Road. And I want to say a lot of this stuff is really nice. Like, I know I'm going to be like, meh, but there's a lot of stuff that's really nice. And I love that we got up the football field in there without the lighting. I think that's great. I think more athletic stuff is fantastic. I'm going to reiterate what Susan Mitchell said, which is I just keep hearing that we're sort of bending over backwards for something that people are going to stay. They don't really bring much to the town. And like the community center not being on the 55 acres. There's a lot of really good reasons to put the community center on the 55 acres, including the fact that if it is on the 55 acres, it's a Charlestown community center. If it's not on the 55 acres, it's a everybody community center that we don't control. So we're spending all this money on it, but we're not controlling it. And I understand, circulation and all that. That's really circulation for something that happens 7 days out of the year. That's affecting something that's going to be for the town of Charlestown 365 days of the year. So to me, I don't understand the cost benefit analysis with, I mean, I do understand that, you guys are trying really hard to make it so the park is accessible all the time, especially during the busiest weekends. And, I've said that. At the same time, we've had other events that come, that go, having a specific open, it's a venue that could be, I don't know, a park or something else. It's just, we're twisting ourselves up into knots for something that nobody wants. So why are we having it? The next thing I wanted to say is I would just like to make sure that all of the comments go into the record so that, if we look back on this, they don't get lost. Because I think there's a tremendous amount of public comment that just needs to be preserved. And then the last thing is, we've been talking about not talking about lighting. We've been talking about not saying we're going to have lighting, but we're not saying that we're not going to have lighting. And I think it's important that we say straight up, we don't want lights in the park. Well, thank you.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Jim Manzo. And I was a member of the town council in 2008 when we approved the original Ninigret Park master plan and paid $50,000 for it to the company that just finished this plan. And I'd like to, if I may, just read you a paragraph out of that plan. Part of the master plan includes a recommendation for the construction of an outdoor concert and event facility on approximately 20 acres of land located in the northeast corner of the town-owned 55-acre parcel. An additional 20 acres of land contiguous to the festival area will be cleared and prepared to accommodate approximately 1,500 overnight campers. This proposal corresponds with the Parks Planning Survey recommendations that a plan shall be built at Ninigret Park. It also complements the long-term goals of the town to develop a permanent outside event and concert facility as an income-producing asset to supplement the town's property tax base. That was 15 years ago. And ever since then, we've been kicking the can down the road, and nothing has ever been done. I think this plan has been revised 2 or 3 times, and I think tonight I heard someone say that an event facility didn't make sense because there's only one event being held at the park. Did I hear that correctly? That's patently absurd. Do you know why there's only one event being held at the park? Because of the production cost it costs to put one on. Rhythm and Roots probably has to pay anywhere between $250,000 to $300,000 just to get set up there for that week's event. And most people can't handle that kind of an expense, especially if it fails. So if you had an event facility at the park, you wouldn't have to go through that expense. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing I wanted to mention to you, what was that? Several years ago, the town spent over $300,000 to put a bicycle track in the park. I didn't see that called out on that. Did you identify it?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. But I don't know what the recommendation of this committee will be with respect to an event center. But you need to know, I don't know what the town council will do.
Right.
But I think that as far as the event center is concerned, I'm going to show you something. This is a copy of an initiative petition. Okay? It requires 50 signatures from qualified taxpayers of the town to put a question on the ballot for the financial town meeting. And they can vote to put money in the budget to build an event center. And that's where it's going to happen this year.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Ron Arden. I live at 2 Partridge Drive in Charlestown. It was a very impressive presentation. I was wondering whether this is in fact good for a town of approximately 3,000 people or for a suburb of 25,000 people. It's very clear in the history of the time that I've lived here, people go to that park. But your building is a mega event center, and other things in the park which will enhance no part of these issues at all. I want to about a couple of things. You haven't mentioned cost. You haven't mentioned the facings and at which point I'm going to enough to enjoy this, or if it's long enough to enjoy it. And I think we know those backgrounds. You have really designed it. I've had buckets might not say go for it. But I don't think this town does that. We have a town in South County where the poor people pay median costs in this one. We're among towns, Richmond, Charlestown, and Huntington, who the list. Tickets to these events are $59 for one person. That creates something called an open space that I need to venue. There's no guarantee that they're just going to stick around. That's been the cash cow here. Seafood Festival, that's a mess. But I remember we had a conversation about bringing large events. Gentleman Mr. Susan, if I'm not mistaken, talked about bringing top flight entertainment. And when I asked him how much it was going to cost, he wouldn't give us the answers. Is this going to be supported in this town? People made a development claims for $100,000 for a survey. That survey is indicating we like the situation the way it is. No lights. This is what it seems to me that certain people run on a platform where they listen to the citizens. The citizens are spoken. That clear. I have no power if I have the money, the resources, and the time. Something like this would against the overall quality, but not just for Charlestown. It represents another problem. Topic. Not too long ago, they just completed a section of the north-south corridor on Route 1, construction. Convention about how long it took to get to the Westerly and other places in the off-season. Then we're inviting a situation where we're going to be bringing people in When all of us just want to go to the beach when we want to go, or we want to go to the park when we want to go without congestion. This invites congestion among other problems that are very much patently obvious in terms of what a master plan has to address. No one's talking about traffic. No one's talking about maximum use. You can know when so the seafood doesn't dry up. What do you do about the parcel of land? They grass for cows? I don't think so. I think they do in place or some clandestine attempt to build a place, a shell or a bandstand, which you define as a bandstand. That means different things to different people. Because maybe part of the natural what that would look like. And my fear is that somewhere along the line, someone's going to get they tried to pull up a couple of years ago, more entertaining in the summer, investing in this town, which we cannot abide by. What I'm saying, the company which you wish for.
So, Platinum, and I think the sites have done a great job. And I mean, context of what we've had to work with, and part of that has been a lot of comments. And that's why it's really important that those comments that you receive be part of the plan, because not just be used by you, but actually be to them part of the plan. Because a lot of your time was kind of too close.
You're too close, so like, yeah, the people at home can't hear you.
Never been told I was loud enough. Now you can't hear me at all.
We'll put her up, don't worry.
Okay, well, I don't know what to do now. But anyway, so it's really important that those comments are part of the plan, because you spent a lot of time on the issue of lighting without knowing these things. One of the comments you got was from Rhode Island Audubon Society, but the public has not had the advantage of knowing what those comments were. And if there's another plan, and also as you work through the plan to implement it, it's really important to know what influenced the plan and not have to keep going through this every 10 years. We heard about a letter from 11 years ago. So that just, I'm asking that all of the correspondence you've written, no matter what that correspondence is, be part of this plan. One of the things I don't know if you've taken into account is sea level rise. I know you took the floodplain into consideration, but 80 years from now, a lot of the park may be underwater during storms. So again, I don't know how much you took that into consideration. In this process, the importance of the National Wildlife Refuge, I don't think it's been respected enough. And again, that's not a criticism on you. It's part of this whole process. And again, within the context of the process, you did a good job. The importance of the National Wildlife Refuge is amplified by climate change, by the loss of habitat locally, and throughout the migratory route from Canada to South America of the millions of birds that go through this area. The previous refuge manager said that there should not be fireworks next to the refuge in his departing letter. But this summer, I could hear the fireworks in Ninigret Park 5 miles away. And so the issues he brought up should also be influencing this process. We need to respect the importance of the Ninigret National Wildlife Refuge and plan to protect it. Ninigret Park is meant to be a buffer to the wildlife refuge, and I don't see this plan as a buffer. I know you talk about a buffer in it, but the whole 172 acres is supposed to be a buffer. I think that the use is a bit intense, and I, again, don't see that it buffers adequately. The question I have is how many total parking spaces will there be? Or how many cars do you think are served by all the parking, if you have any idea?
So we've been fairly modest. This thing facilitated about 500. We're just a reduced area. We're giving up a little bit of that, taking up here. We have around about 300 within this area, depending on how much landscape you want to have within it. This is a little over 1,000. And then with these additional areas, which are pavement, probably have another 200 to 300 or so. So you have about 1,400 spaces.
So,
Less than consistent pavement.
okay. And what do you think that serves, about 5,000 people or?
I mean, if you were to say, it all depends. If you just use an average of 2 people per car, right, you know, then you could serve up to 3,000. But that doesn't include the camper area, especially during the different venues, which is where all the spotted trees are, which is another area to park.
Because Ninigret has 5,000 people on their big day. And those people are there pretty much all day. So you may not have adequate parking for that one event.
Yeah, we took it into consideration, because I know also, you know, some of the parking could bleed down into these areas here. I know we looked at it very carefully, and I know Josh went through like the acreage of like what's being used now. And what we were proposing, we're trying to be as sensitive as possible to that. So we did spend some time looking at that closely.
So as you mentioned, a large portion of those Ninigret attendees are going to be the campers up there. And then you have day parking down here. And it's a balance of trying to allow the daily uses to be accessed while also providing ample space and revegetating. So it's quite the choice.
I'm not advocating for more parking. I just, that the parking determines how many people you can have on site. It's your busing, which is another story. I find it unlikely that you, and I think that was sort of Mr. Maggio's comments, that you spend this much money to create an event center for 2 events, one of which, you know, and that somehow if these events went away, you wouldn't replace them. So it just seems that this is an event center for many events. The fact that you don't have them yet, unless the plan specifically says that there's going to be some limit on the number of events currently too, and that number isn't going up. Otherwise, that's the concern that people have, is how many events. And again, the parking itself, so you have a potential commercial use if you have events on the 55 acres, but you're parking all those cars on 172 acres, which is the federal lands to parks land. So you're using what is meant to be a public use to support what is a private use or a commercial use. And I think that's a conflict. And it becomes more of a conflict the more events there are. So I think, you know, everyone's sort of saying, we already have these 2 events. And we've always, you know, we've had them for a long time and they've been accepted. But if you're creating something that is for a greater use and more intense use, then that issue of using what has to be a public land to support a commercial use, and it's coming out of that federal lands to parks program, potential conflict. I think it's definitely a problem to have the community center on the federal lands to parks land because it has to be open to the public, and saying it's just a town use is a private use. You know, it's like having a private beach for the town. So that, you know, that's a, you know, I don't know the definite answer to that, but again, that's a potential conflict that you need to figure out before you go forward with that. And again, the parking creates, you know, potential lighting impacts and noise impacts, and depending on how many events there are, those are impacts on the wildlife refuge. And those are my comments.
Thank you. So, real quick, if I made one quick comment, it's really quick. Just real quick, again, we are trying to juggle a lot, as you know, there's a lot going on. So again, this is already paved, right? We're not creating all new parking there. It's already existing pavement. Yes, it is on the 172 acres, but we are trying to be smart about that. Secondly, as Josh mentioned, we had specific conversations with the folks from Rhythm Roots. We wanted to identify exactly the space they need to perform. So our space, our open venue, if you look on the 2014, it's just a massive open space. We're trying to be very thoughtful about integrating and responding and creating very much smaller spaces that respond to exactly what they need. If by chance they did leave, these could be turned into whether it's athletic fields to generate more revenue for you, or just open grasslands like you have down here. You could be flexible.
Right, next, I'm off of Brian from Broward Drive. I'd like to thank the handsome gentleman on the left for remarking that you can actually have your headlights strike reflectors and not have to use street landscape. I share with NHTSB, please, and shut up a lot of lights. The other thing is you remarked that there was an area on the far right for troll, which suggests you haven't been to many of our town meetings. The reason you like one of the things that Ruth said, the lady who was just in front of you. Model we're using for sea level rise. Using this model. See how burn, which means you got to strip land from somewhere to get it to make a sound burn. This model of sea level rise have you used, okay? And that should be known to us because some of us believe in different models. The man in red, two ahead of me, remarked the size was fit for a small city. Okay? And that without any meaning to offend Frederick Law Olmsted, it suggests that parks have consequences. Okay? And if anybody in this room has read Jane Jacobs' Life and Death of Great American Cities, they should, because these consequences will affect all of us, okay? And some of them are negative. Okay? The last thing that goes along with my questions are, you keep on using two terms interchangeably, town and community. I think that's wrong. I think we all know that that's wrong, and we need to reflect on that. I have nothing else to offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Francis Topping, Stillwater Road. It looks very nice. It's phased, so it's not necessarily all at once. However, there are issues, as many people have said. I applaud the idea of getting rid of invasives and putting in more native plants and trees, and you've got vegetation. I also applaud the idea of reflectors, because I think that for those who go at night, which is mainly for Frosty Drew, reflectors would work. Also to the senior center right now, reflectors would be put in the back area. I encourage the idea of interpretive and directional signage on the trails and the expansion or protection of Frosty Drew, because it's a unique resource in the town. I'm curious, what were the height of the berms for the entry and for the berms on the open space area? What height were they?
You mean the main entrance here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the stone sign out there is, approximately 4 or so feet tall. If we were to just make a nice backdrop to that, those berms would be up in that height range, 3 to 4.
What about the ones at the back?
So here, I mean, these, architects try and see, like, if we have the material.
Yeah.
Killings from the removal of asphalt, we can utilize those in different areas for other areas that might be split into the lack of material. So, I mean, I would love to see 6, 8, maybe even 10 feet tall berms. Because those could also be used. Those could also be used for winter activities as well.
I was curious. I know from the last meeting where you said about using the asphalt, if you use permeable pavers or something instead of the old asphalt that's crumbling. And I think on those berms, okay, I don't see it on the ones for the trees because I think they need better. The football field, I'm not opposed to a field that they can use. I saw something at my door actually. For their games, and I'm not a big football fan, but for their games, they need the daylight and parking. But for their practice, they need lights for winter time or fall time, which aren't appropriate here. So I think they need to think about dividing the whole idea. I think somebody already mentioned about the community center, the lighting and regionality and where it should be. The public venue space, I understand why it's been put there because we have the two events and we want to keep them away from the public circulation. If they use all the parking, then there isn't parking for people wanting to use the rest of the area. So I think it needs to be a restricted area that's for parking for events, if we have events. And if there was that space created, I mean, we can have smaller, less impactful events that are daytime things that don't have, loud noises and and bright lights. So I think there is other uses for that, or as you say, an open space. But I think you put that in a phase 3, so that's down the road. There is also the Corps. You mentioned about the Corps of Engineers, and there's areas where that shouldn't be disturbed, and I'm not sure whether that's all been taken into account or not. Also, the memorandum, the original Fish and Wildlife, or the whole deal, was saying we shouldn't have commercial in the town, in the area. So that is something to work out with Fish and Wildlife. I don't know how much dollars that we ever get generated for the town. I've never seen any cost benefit analysis of events and what they bring in and what they cost the town. We talked about lighting, we're saying, and I think I agree with the fact that we need to state there's no lighting, as opposed to just, oh, well, we're not putting it in right now. And what was the other one? When we were in communication with Charlie Vandermeer, who was Kerry's predecessor, he was saying that those periods when migratory birds are here, between May 15th and August 15th for nesting, the spring migration is important. The fall one especially important, and that's late August into September and October. Those need to be somewhere in the plan, I think, that says these are important times. They say from their netting, bird banding netting, that there's more birds passing through here than anywhere else on coastal Maine and Massachusetts. It's a really important area, and birds have been in great decline lately. So saying they're not important, anybody says that, they are, for many, many different reasons. When it came to allocating resource protection money for the town, where our tax dollars should go, the survey said resource protection was very high. Improving or expanding events and things was low on the totem pole. There was a memo from the Planning Commission to the Town Council that related to the environmental land use restriction, where it recommended the Parks and Recreation Commission incorporate the building restriction and the groundwater withdrawal restriction into the Ninigret Park Master Plan by limited activities on the site as appropriate and by delineating areas where groundwater restriction was necessary. I don't know how much of that's been resolved, but that's something that needs to be addressed is any future Corps of Engineer thing. So if there are no lights, then the fact of ecological light pollution and astronomical light pollution should be resolved. But I think we do need to minimize any impacts to the wildlife refuge while still providing a lot of activities for Charlestown residents that can be done with less impact. There's a lot of nice things in here with shade trees, etc. I'm not sure how much of it we can actually impact.
Hi, my name is Carrie Drew Wagner, and I just wanted to briefly touch upon a few things that have been discussed and debated recently with respect to the Ninigret Park Master Plan. As Frosty Drew's niece, I witnessed his hard work and dedication to preserving the natural beauty of Charlestown. His struggle to prevent New England electric systems, et cetera, from erecting one of the largest nuclear power plants on the eastern seaboard, right here in Charlestown. His struggle was informed and it was compassionate. It was ultimately detrimental to his physical well-being. It was important. My uncle, who contracted polio as a small child and passed away at age 28, was a man who truly cared about his community and his environment. He understood that nature does not stop when the sun sets. The nocturnal creatures who live in Ninigret Park rely on the darkness for their survival, and some of them, the New England cottontail rabbit, the eastern small brown bat are listed as endangered species, and evidently the Department of Fish and Wildlife can speak to this in detail and a lot more knowledgeably than I. There is, however, no doubt that brightly lit playing fields would interfere and adversely affect their habitats. So the natural world includes the sky, and the negative impact of bright nighttime lights near the Frosty Drew Observatory would neutralize our unique position and prevent further study of our natural world. Just as important, it would prevent the many individuals and families and children the joyful recreation of stargazing through our state-of-the-art telescopes. We can absolutely not operate the observatory under bright light conditions, and ours is a small patch of land relative to the remaining acreage in Ninigret Park, and we do not ask for much. So it's rare these days to find a spot as beautiful as Ninigret, and it should be honored, and it should be for everyone.
Hi, it's Bonnie Van Slyke. For 8 years, I served on the town council and heard from constituents their opinions regarding dark skies and preserving our natural resources. I am also George Blivens' daughter, and for those who are new to town, my father and many other citizens of the town fought hard again, and including Frosty Drew particularly, against plans to build a nuclear power plant in Ninigret Park. He was then instrumental in the development of the park, consistent with the National Park Service's program of utilization. Goulding's decision that ultimately awarded the park, all 227 acres of the park, to Charlestown, mandated that the entire park would be consistent with the wildlife refuge. Even though we have municipal uses, the entire part is supposed to be consistent with the wildlife refuge. If it were not for the wildlife refuge and its request for part of the Charlestown Naval Auxiliary Landing Field, we would be talking about decommissioning a nuclear power plant that had come to the end of its life. It is horrifying to consider what the impact of building such a plant would have been on Charlestown. Instead, we get to talk about lighting and other uses in our town park. Some seem very anxious to make dark skies all about Frosty Drew, and it is important. That is also a red herring. Indeed, Frosty Drew could be important economically to the town, and it's certainly important to the education of our young people. But dark skies are important for many other reasons as well. One reason is the impact of light pollution on the mission of the Ninigret Wildlife Refuge, and its importance to the survival of migratory birds and other threatened and endangered species.
Another is the simple fact that citizens enjoy looking up and seeing the stars, including what 80% of the people in the United States cannot see, and that is the Milky Way. The town has spent approximately $100,000 to ask residents what they want. We have spent approximately $35,000 to go through a very expedited master plan process. We have a business survey that says over 55% of the businesses see no impact from events in Ninigret Park. It is clear what people want. The conceptual plan is beautiful. I do wonder how all this is going to fit, but that's another issue. Residents do not want the park developed intensely or even at all developed at all, and they don't want commercial development. And that should be an objective of the 2023 master plan. They do not want a performing arts area or an open space venue of the size being shown, or actually any size whatsoever. This element needs to be removed from the 2023 master plan, and that area left undeveloped. They do not want extensive new sports fields. This is wonderful, the ones that you have there, I think that's nice. These fields should be, the extensive fields should be at Charahoe, not in Ninigret Park. The fields should be removed from the ones that you had talked about perhaps having should not be in this plan, and I'm glad to see that they are not. They do not want any part of the 227 acres lighted. The plan should state explicitly that there will be no lighting in Ninigret Park. This has been an issue that has been discussed over and over again since at least 2012, and I think before, with the same conclusion being reached. To admit explicitly stating that there will be no lighting in Ninigret Park is irresponsible. Putting a community center on land given to the town by the federal government means that Charlestown's taxpayers will be paying to build, staff, and maintain a regional facility. Perhaps this center could be put in the traditional business district where it would attract people for the businesses there. The 55 acres is another option, but it could also go somewhere that is not in Ninigret Park. Asphalt needs to be removed. That has been part of the program of utilization since 1980. Asphalt should not be added, and we're adding more parking. There is more than enough parking, even when some asphalt is removed as planned. Buffering the National Wildlife Refuge from noise and trespass by dogs should be part of the plan. That's wonderful. Restoring and preserving the conservation value of the land, which was also part of the program of utilization, should be part of the plan. I do want to add that I do believe all the testimony and the letters that have been sent, which none of us have actually seen, should be made a part of the record of this meeting and the minutes of this meeting, and also as part of the plan. But definitely they should be part of the record going forward. I guess before I end, I don't understand why we are doing all this for two events that people like where they are. They seem to work well. I don't understand. I can see there are some good things in this plan, but I don't understand why we are clearing all that land for this particular purpose. And again, I do wonder, you know, how you're going to fit a community center with basketball courts and all kinds of things where you have located it, and a bunch of other things. I don't, it's a nice concept, and a lot of it will work, but I don't understand how that's going to work.
I understand. We're going to publish it, but that makes the money.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Mappy, resident in town.
Can you move the mic up a little bit?
Sorry. What got me up tonight to talk was just the comment on the parking about at the events. Now, I like Zydeco music. Maybe a lot of people don't. I don't like seafood, so I don't go to the seafood fest, but I go to the Cajun fest. Has anyone done any metering, traffic metering of the amount of cars that come in and out that weekend to really know how much parking is happening?
We have not.
Nothing. because it sounded like there wasn't going to be enough, and that parking was going to overflow into these other uses that we're trying to open the park up for. The lighting, I heard a lot of good news about the lighting today. I like that. One thing I wanted to mention was that I happened this year to find a light pollution map of the Northeast. And the area of this coast from Stamford, Connecticut, all the way to Newport is, yellow grade light pollution on a scale of green, yellow, and red, except this area here. This is one of the few areas on this coast that is not considered to have a light pollution problem. So I just want us to consider that at all times, how unique this is to this coast. The initial point you said was that you were just looking to be able to have families come to the park during these events, Labor Day weekend, and the Seafood Fest. And I feel like this was all drawn back out to address that problem. And that I'm wondering if you ever really stopped to just see if there's a minimal solution to that problem, whether it be vouchers from the vendors for town residents, or whether it be moving some of the fencing to allow access to the playground, as opposed to having to do all this to address issues that you said was the primary thing that you wanted to address in the beginning, which was how do kids get to play in the park on Saturday and Sunday, those 2 weeks. That's it. Thank you.
Dave Fabassia, Daventry Street. First, I want to say that there's an awful lot about this plan that is very good, and you've worked hard to try to reflect the concerns of the community in large measure. I want to be sure that I understand that the Seafood Festival would be supposedly held in that venue area. Is that correct? Okay. I just,
Oh, that's what the intent.
all right,
Sure, but I mean, down the road.
understand. I just wanted to be clear. That was the intent. I've spent a lot of time at the park and also as part of the Parks and Recreation Commission and chair there. And so I'm aware of a fair amount of the activity there. And one of the things that seems strange to me is that we've got a lot of energy and expense on the criterion. And I need to have someone here tell me how many events a year are at the criterion, how much is that actually used? I don't see it when I'm there. I see the playground, I see the multi-use path, I see the disc golf. These things are constantly used. The criterion I do not see used, and I'd like to hear from you what you know about the amount of time and use goes to the criterion. Do you have details on that?
I don't have exact details, but I know going into the park at night, usually I go and clean the dog park up around sundown during the summer on movie nights, and it's always being used. It's constantly being used from like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on.
Okay.
I mean, they're doing time trials that they're set up. The other guys are doing cool down laps in the park. It's like a regular tour de Charleston going on, and that's usually in the summertime. I don't know, say 5 to 7, 8 or something like that.
Okay.
Quite a bit, and then I see them there on the weekends quite a bit too.
Setting that level of use, then it
Yeah.
warrants the cost.
I see it all the time.
And I just not a time that I obviously am there to observe
Okay.
that, so that's helpful to understand. My other suggestion is that I personally think the community center would be better suited on the 55 acres. But beyond that, I think there's a lot of good stuff in the plan.
Thank you. Next.
Kathleen Seeplick, 140 Hoxie Avenue. My question, and this is wonderful, is addressing the water issue. When you have new plantings that you're talking about, all these new trees, all these new berms that you are doing, the amount of water in our community is not that has water in our sewers or septics or anything. And that's another issue, septics. Where, if you're going to be putting these buildings in, where and how many people, how many bathrooms you will be using, how much of our water will you be using? most places to establish trees and other shrubberies need 3 years of water because they might die due to drought. So are you going to bring in portable water and us as taxpayers going to have to pay for this water? Or are you going to somehow, obviously, you're not bringing it in through pipes, that's being facetious. But how are you going to supply all of this water for all of this amount of people using all of our bathrooms, all of these athletic facilities? You can't keep on bringing porta-johns. You can't keep on bringing in hand sanitizers. And I'm going to, before you answer that, I'm going to jump for a second with the ice skating rinks and all. We know that westerly through the YMCA and Washington Bank, they're having a hard time keeping ice on their ice skating rinks. And so that's something down here. I don't know that that's totally an attraction for any of us. So please answer the question about how you're going to supply all the water for all of this acres and acres.
So there are actually 7 wells on site
Mm-hmm.
that are currently existing. That would probably be the most convenient access to.
Okay.
And that's another thing. I mean, this is just a vision. So, I mean, this isn't, we're not going to go in there and be done by steps. It would nothing would be done in one shot. This could be years down the road before one thing is even implemented. So it's not like they're going to go in there and just rip it all up and put rows of trees in.
Something that I am surprised that we don't have anything saying we're going to do this the first year or 2.
That's up to the town council, that building office at that period of time.
Okay.
The town council could go in there and say, we're not doing a single thing, or a town council could go in there and say, we'd like to see bathrooms and of asphalt. That is strictly up to the town council that is holding office at that point in time to reference this plan and say, well, maybe we should do something on it, or maybe we shouldn't.
And part of the whole bathrooms and water and all that, that obviously would have to go through a permitting process. So if we're talking about the Rex Community Center, that would have to go through building department, zoning and all that to make sure however it's designed and the needs of that facility would be met a specific way through a specific design process. In regards to water, of course, anything that would be proposed here would be native. That would be first and foremost primary. And then what you do is if you do chunks of phases of plantings, you put it on the contractor, the landscape contractor, to water those plants for a certain period of time. So that's usually part, everything we work on just about every single day is how we put together specifications and how the maintenance followed up to each of the projects we work on. And then, when we've specified native plants, those root in is, quicker than other plants that they're not native. And yeah, I mean, the tough thing is long-term, if there is a drought 3 years down the road, sure, there is a monitoring process to follow up just to make sure, because usually it takes, a couple of years to really get a plant going, get the roots going and so forth. But, by specifying natives and following up with a maintenance program, that's how we normally handle those things to make sure they do get established and put it in the contractor's hands.
Okay, it's just taxpayers, it's a lot of money along the road, that's all.
Yeah, thank you.
Ellen Frost, Ocean View Avenue. This is my second of these meetings, and I think we've gotten a lot of great information. Heard a tremendous amount of objections and concerns. My question is one of process. What happens now? Can you tell us a little bit about what the process is, how this will go to the town council, and whether or not the community will have additional opportunity once some of these objections and concerns have been heard? Will they have another chance to vet the final plan as well as to understand the expense that the taxpayers are going to incur on top of the expense both for the survey, the consultants or developers who have already been paid a certain amount of money? What will the expense be? What's the cost benefit, analysis that has been asked for going forward?
Okay, the Park and Recs Commission, we're a subcommittee of it. the Ninigret Park Master Plan, and we were tasked with going through this exercise and gathering all this up. We have just finished our scope of it. So now these gentlemen here, they finish up after they hear some stuff tonight in the restaurant, they put it together and they'll give it to Vicky probably sometime late December, I'd say, somewhere in there, and that, and then Vicky will get it, and then she'll bring it to the council and bring them in and say, this is what we got from VHB and this is all the stuff. And then it will be up to the council to say, well, we want to look at it, we want to talk about it in February, we want to talk about it in June, we want to have an open meeting, we want to have a workshop. That's totally up to the council.
Okay, great.
Done with it here.
Okay, so that gives the opportunity for the
Yeah,
public to.
so that's the thing. So anything that goes on, well, Susan, town council, Peter's right behind you. So that's how that goes. So that would go to the town council, and then the town council would can say anything from, well, I think we should take a look at removing asphalt, see if we can get that done this year. Or let's hold off on this for a year or two. We don't know. But we've just done our part.
Okay. To the day,
All right, thank you.
Susan Cooper, I am here as a private citizen this evening. I am liaison to the back.
Yeah.
Sorry. Better?
Perfect.
Okay. And I am liaison to the Parks and Recreation Commission, so I've had a chance to sort of watch this process throughout the fall. And I want to say to you this evening that I think it's a real testament, your presentation this evening, to the power of letting the public comment. You started off in an area, understandably, thinking about lighting and various other things that really are not what people want here. And you have, I think, to the extent that your presentation tonight sets forth some of it, you have heard that. To that end, I really ask the subcommittee to make sure that the email comments that have been referenced, the 50 or 60 that you received, are part of the report, because they are part of the story of how we got here. I'd also ask that when the final report comes from the subcommittee or from Parks and Recreation, that it be made public so that people have a chance to look at that and begin to consider what their comments will be, because we understand that tonight there seems to be a recognition that lighting is not something that's wanted, but that's been an important issue. The other issue that's been very important, I think, has been the open space venue, and I just have questions. One is, all of that area that you're talking about is going to require clearing of existing trees and shrubbery. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you don't specifically have in the plan a timeline for asphalt removal from other areas in the park.
So it's kind of the next step, right? I mean, we have to develop the phasing a little bit further, right? We have to, and this is a deliverable that it's just, we're not at that point of the process. We have to know what we want to get to. We need to see the vision so that we can identify the area to remove. Because if, you just start ripping up the pavement, we might have wanted to preserve that for functional parking during some phase. So we need to see the final vision in order to implement the steps.
Right. Okay. And then I guess I would just point out that I think at least the Seafood Festival has preferred an asphalt surface for handicap access and things like that. So I don't know that this takes this into account, but it seems a little counterintuitive to me to be trees and shrubbery, et cetera, to create this open space before we start to address all that existing asphalt that's there. But it sounds like you at least are considering that that's an issue. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ninigret, 2 Partridge Run. I want to thank this committee. You did a great job presenting this evening. You thought of everything. It's very, very detailed.
In another life, I was very involved with school construction. And if I ever submitted a plan without at least an estimate for the cost and a timeline, they would tell me it's no plan. And I think for the people sitting here tonight, one of the things that they're thinking is, how much is this going to cost the average taxpayer? So I don't know if you have an associated cost with soup to nuts before it goes to the town council, or if that wasn't part of your purview.
Yeah, and just to answer that, yeah, we have worked up some numbers. We're finding it because we wanted to see how this meeting came and then what changes, and then we refine that. But yes, that is part of our services that we're providing to the committee.
So can you give us a number tonight?
For everything. It's,
We do have to make changes now, right?
Okay, I had asked, this was your wish list. So if your wish list were granted, what is the number associated with that for the town?
yeah, it could be anywhere between 20 and 30 million for the whole thing. Yeah, and so you need to also understand it doesn't all come from taxpayer money, right? A lot of this stuff comes from grants, right? The funding that was just provided recently came from the Rhode Island, was it the Green Fund or whatever they call it? So you have a multitude of different grants. We did some other master plans. We identified a multitude of different grants that you can go after. Some that regards to sustainability, of course, the Land Water Conservation Fund. You have the Rhode Island Fund that puts out, millions of dollars per year. And I know right now that's getting taken care of between Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. There's like $30 million that are being put out there for different restoration projects. And so there's a multitude of different things that can apply for sustainable treatments like stormwater treatment where you're helping the environment. National and NPS provides various grants as well. So that's something we're also going to put in the master plan report. We're going to identify those various resources for funding so that the Parks and Rec and other departments can go after these type of grants. So,
But I'm also very familiar with grant writing, and I can't imagine that the grants you would get total are going to come in $30 million.
it's over a long period of time. It certainly is.
I have, and thank you for your answer. I've heard multiple people come up here tonight saying, why are we doing this, the two events? I think the elephant in the room is we may or may not have these two events in the future, but it's a foot in the door to open this to other big venues. And then what is the impact for the town, not only financially, but for the overwhelming response that people gave on the town survey, that they wanted it more or less kept the way it is. They didn't want major expansion. But if you do this and rhythm and roots go away, that opens the door for who knows how many events to come in. Just a concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott McNeil. I'm the director of the Crossy Drew Center. I wanted to start by thanking you guys for the work you've done on this plan and for taking the time, Josh, to speak with me personally about some of the goals and inclusions that Crossy Drew would like to see in it. I was very happy to see the inclusion of reflectors in lieu of lighting in the park, which I think is a fantastic move forward. And I think it will serve the park and the community very well. My concern tonight, from a perspective of what's right for Crossy Drew, what's right for this natural resource, is that there's still a prospect of lighting in the park. And Mark, you brought it up as well. You kind of tied it in with safety, which is something I disagree with. But the prospect of lighting in the park remains a threat. I'm an individual that spends his night, every night, out underneath the stars. whether it be here in Charlestown, whether it's in Providence, whether it's on the top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. I look for spots in the world that are dark. Spots where you can still see that view of the sky that our ancestors experienced from their front yards. And of all the places I've been, there's maybe two that rival Ninigret Park. And to me, that blows my mind that this resource exists in this region. No one's driving to the top of Mauna Kea. Most of the people that try to drive to the top of Mauna Kea get deterred by all the pictures of totaled vehicles laying on the side of the access road. And the other spot, which is Cherry Springs State Park that I've been to, that's pretty phenomenal, is in the middle of nowhere. It's not a destination for families. It's not a destination for anybody who's looking to have a nice accommodation. It's a destination for campers that want to experience the night sky. Charlestown has the infrastructure to support this as a dark sky destination. Now, I've been reading too that New Zealand has been working to make their entire nation a dark sky preserve. Not a park, not a town, not even a county, the whole nation, the whole country. And I think to myself, we have this amazing resource here in southern New England that we could do amazing things with. And we're talking about preserving the darkness in a park in a town in Rhode Island. I've heard people come up tonight and speak, and everyone's made really great points. I agree there's some really amazing things in your plan. I'm very impressed with what you guys have developed here. And personally, I see things in your plan that I think are really great. But in redeveloping the master plan, along with the things that we've heard and the reasons why we're doing it, is largely to better it, to improve upon what has already been developed. And I think this is a good time to codify dark skies in Ninigret Park, because it is a valuable resource. So with that said, I'd like to just to thank you again for what you guys have done. And I do think that it is time for the town to do this. It's what the people want. It's what our visitors want. And when you look up Charlestown on the internet, you see pictures of the Dival Lake. The Dival Lake is something you don't see in New England, but you can see it here. The Dival Lake is when you're on the ocean on a boat, or you're in Atacama in Chile, or on the top of Hawaii. And Charlestown has that. You see pictures of the Milky Way. Milky Way is so vast that people drive down from all over the Northeast, all over the East Coast to come here and see it. So, thank you.
Question. Sky Glow.
Say it one time.
Sky Glow.
Sky Glow. Yes, I'm.
Sky Glow. First issue.
Now you're talking about artificial sky glow or natural sky?
I'm saying about artificial sky glow. Satellite vertically. At night, you see the lights, the transit up. It's a vertical light that we're looking at. So the way it's dispersed in is limited. Sky glow is like when and we're seeing dispersed. The city is about 157 miles. Sky glow it's 4 times more cities, which is over 150 miles. That means where light hits us, we're already attacked by these larger cities. We can't afford to have any lights in.
So,
Yeah.
and this is one of the things that make Ninigret Park so special. It's a very unique location. So one of the questions we're asked really frequently at Drew is, how come this spot is this dark? How come we can see the Milky Way like this here? I'll drive 5 to 10 minutes north and I don't see it like this. The answer comes down to the way the park is situated, with the communities north of the park, the wildlife refuge south of the park, and then the ocean south of there. The way the park creates this drop into this area of wide open sky, we don't have sky glow coming in from communities south of us because they're not there. To the communities that are west and the east of us, not so much either. Now, if we look to the north, we can see the sky glow from as far as Boston. We have Providence, Cranston, Warwick. We have a big light dome over there from all that. We can also see the sky glow from URI. Having that southerly view, which is where all the best stuff in the sky is anyway, that's where the Milky Way is. That's where we're looking towards the center of the galaxy. That's where you see those thousands of stars overhead. That area is not getting developed. So it's not going to go away. Now, sky glow from a more of a scientific perspective is the idea that as light moves through the atmosphere, it scatters. We see this during the day. That's why the sky is blue. All the blue light coming from the sun interacts with oxygen molecules and nitrogen in the atmosphere, and it scatters among it. And light stays in the atmosphere. That's why we see that really red moon during a total lunar eclipse that people call the blood moon, because Earth filters out all the blue light. When we have artificial light put into the sky, or just even onto the ground that reflects into the sky, that light will scatter just like sunlight will, and it will stay in the atmosphere, and it causes the atmosphere to become brighter than the objects that are in space. Therefore, removing our view of them.
All right, thanks. Supposed to get everybody out of here by 9.
So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I just had a very quick one.
Go ahead, quick.
Just very quick. One, I think also we should think about decibel level included in the park.
Okay.
And we have a community center, you said about lighting. And we already have some regional events in the Criterion, the Soccer Classic, the Disc Golf, and Frosty Drew. That's handleable.
Thank you. Make a motion for adjournment. Aye. Thank you, everybody.